Julius Randle is likely done for the season, so the young guys are stepping up, highlighted by the second-year point guard from Kentucky, making some New York Knicks history. What's up, beautiful people? Welcome to the Putback with Ian Begley live. I'm Chris Williamson, alongside our SNY NBA insider, Ian Begley. We're joined by the one and only Marc Berman, who covers the Knicks for the New York Post, and Jonathan Macri, who is the dean of Knicks Film School. And, we are streaming live on SNY.TV as well as Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube channels. As always, we tip things off with a baseline. And Ian, for the second straight week, we are leading with Mr. IQ, Immanuel Quickley, who became the second youngest Knick to ever have a triple-double, as he posted 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists in the Knicks win Sunday against Orlando. How much has his stock risen in the second half of this season?
Significantly, Chris, because that first half, it was filled with, inconsistencies, minute fluctuations, and hot and cold performances from Immanuel Quickley. But in this second half, he's really, really risen, and he's really looked like the player that I know a lot of Knick fans hope to see in year two with Immanuel Quickley. And what you're seeing here is Quickley, rise to the challenge of being a lead guard. And listen, he's learning on the job here, but you see him making improvements over time. And that has to be encouraging for the Knicks in a big picture sense when you talk about this roster and where Quickley fits in. Do they see him as a lead guard? Is he a combo guard? Is he a future starter? Is he off the bench? That remains to be seen. But the idea that he's making this kind of progression late in a lost season is at least one of the few positives that you can take from this year.
And because of all of this success that he's having in the second half of the year, really getting a chance to show what he can do, as a lead guard, Berman, how do you think IQ is going to factor in to next season's plans? Is it going to stay the same as we saw this year and last year, or do you think, he'll get an increased role because of the way he's playing as of late?
Well, it depends on what they do in the offseason at the point guard position, but I think Immanuel Quickley has solidified himself as a Knicks point guard for next season. There was so much doubt on whether he could handle the role. Since the All-Star break, he's really adjusted, and he's setting his teammates up. He's running the show as a floor general. I think, Ian alluded to it earlier in the season. I think IQ's camp was a little disappointed in how he was used minutes-wise. His minutes fluctuated quite a bit. He could play 8 minutes a night if he wasn't going well, and I don't think IQ was happy at that at all. But he's been terrific. He's been their best player since the All-Star break. I know everyone else would say it was RJ Barrett, but efficiency-wise and running the show, he is a point guard next season. Kemba won't be on the team. You don't know about Derrick Rose and how he will come back. We'll see what the Knicks do at the point guard position, but he's proven that he can play point guard in at least a strong backup role next year.
So, Jonathan, let's say the Knicks do draft a really good point guard in the draft. If that happens, how should he factor into next season's plans?
Well, I mean, just looking at this draft, I don't think that there is a point guard that is of the caliber that you would say day one the person's going to step in and be a starter right away. Maybe they get lucky and move up for a chance to draft Jaden Ivey, but even Jaden Ivey's not a point guard. He's more of a combo, if anything. Yeah. I mean, to me, looking at Quickley, and Ian and Marc both kind of hit on it. He's earned an expanded role based on how he's played. I think the conversation a lot of the time gets sidetracked into, is he a point guard? Isn't he a point guard? To me, it's more about where do you slot in on your team? And we have this perception that a point guard needs to be a certain thing because so many of the league's best players happen to play that position. If you're playing alongside two other players who, give you the kind of gravity you need as an offensive engine, and then like a co-engine, slot in RJ and whoever else there next season, I think Quickley's shown enough to be able to say, okay, maybe he could be, the, again, quote unquote, starting point guard for that team. Doesn't mean he has to be, Chris Paul or Steph Curry or some of these other guys that play the position. He could still do an admirable job just because of everything we've seen over the last few months.
Yeah, and that's something that obviously is giving Knicks fans a lot of hope for next year. And of course, you guys run the show, so be sure to submit your questions in the chats wherever you're watching this show. Let's focus on another one of the young guys, Obi Toppin. And he matched his career high with 20 points in each of the last two games He led the way with a plus 46 on Sunday. So with Julius Randle really likely done for the year, how important is this final stretch of the season for Obi to really develop and take his game to another level a little bit?
Yeah, it's big. You want to see what he can do in extended minutes if you're the Knicks, and also the rest of the teams around this league as you're going into this offseason. You want to have a better chance to evaluate what he might look like as a starter and starters minutes. And so, I wouldn't put too much stock into the plus minus, especially against a team like Orlando. But what you're seeing from Toppin, I think you're encouraged by it. One of the things with Obi Toppin in general is the idea that, he's excelled in the pick and roll in college, and you haven't seen that a ton from him here with the Knicks. I wonder if you see that more over these next few games. Again, it's just a handful of games. It's a very small sample size, but any kind of expansion from Toppin or anything that he's showing you he can do that he hasn't done in the past, I think would be encouraging for New York. But, regardless of what Toppin does the rest of the games this season, the Knicks are still faced with that issue, that conundrum with Julius Randle, Obi Toppin. Randle, obviously, playing 35 minutes a night, and Obi Toppin, their top pick in the 2020 draft, not getting a ton of minutes behind him. So regardless of what Toppin does the rest of the way, you still have that kind of conundrum, that question to answer moving forward if you're the Knicks.
And obviously, we'll get to Julius in a little bit later in the show to see how it all work out. But Marc, how do you think, because there have been times where Obi has looked great, with short spurts, but then, there was a point during the season when Julius was out, he got some starting minutes. We kind of saw, I guess, maybe the limit that he was going to be able to reach at that point. So how do you think Obi has developed over the course of this season, particularly though with his shooting?
Exactly. The shooting is everything. The three-point shot is everything in this league. For now, a power forward has to shoot the three. And Julius Randle's season went into the tank because he wasn't hitting the three-point shot. We have seen Obi Toppin improve his three-point shooting recently. He's getting more confidence. And last night in Orlando, 4 of 10 from three. He's been shooting much better. And I think if he can shoot the three like this, Julius Randle is expendable, or maybe, and I wish defensively it would work, to have a Julius Randle, Obi Toppin front court, a 5 and the 4. There's no rim protection. There is rebounding, but in terms of team defense, it's not great. Thibodeau has never liked it defensively. But if that could be the future of the Knicks, if they can't trade Randle and they lose Mitchell Robinson, this is a small ball league. Can Randle and Toppin coexist as the 5 and 4? Who knows? But I will say I'm very impressed how Toppin has improved the three-point shot. He's always been a terrific player on the fast break. He moves the ball better than Randle. His plus minus is always good. Very impressed by Obi's finish to this season.
I could be wrong, but I think Marc might be angling to replace Kenny Payne on Tom Thibodeau's bench. He brought a lot of heat there, a lot of strong opinions. Is that what's next for you, Marc, after so many years leading the beat at the post? Are you going to a coaching or maybe a consultant role? Consultant, yeah. In Florida. Yep, totally.
Down in Florida.
But listen, the Knicks are dead at center right now. If Mitchell is gone, they're dead at center. If they could ever figure out a Randle Toppin 5 and 4, this team could have a future.
What do you think year 3 should look like for Obi, Jonathan, based on what Marc is saying over there?
I must have had something bad for breakfast, because I'm going to agree with Marc again. This is really very strange.
Really?
I agree the shooting is a huge part of it. And I was just looking up some numbers earlier today. It's a small sample size. He's only started 7 games. But when Obi starts, he's hitting 35% from 3, which I think is indicative of the fact that, look, this is a guy who was the highest usage player in college basketball, I think, or roughly his last year of college. He clearly thrives on being in a rhythm. And I think he's shown, especially the last few games, as Marc alluded to, when he gets in a rhythm, he can hit that shot. You look at his free throw numbers too. He's like, this guy should be able to shoot it. I also, again, like Marc, don't know. I have trouble disassociating the Toppin conversation from the Randle conversation, because you ask, how should it look next year? Well, I know how I would like it to look. I would like it to look like Obi Toppin gets a role as a starting power forward on the Knicks, and they would obviously have to materially change their offense, because he is so different from Randle, who is a guy, you dump the ball into and then everything, all the dominoes flow from there. Whereas Obi is very unique because I like to think of Obi as kind of like a connector, right? Like he's doing all the little things, but he's doing it from that power forward position. You don't really have a lot of that in the league today. And he's also this uber athletic guy who's great in transition. He's an interesting fit, and I think he can elevate the play of a lot of those around him, which you look at the year-long on-off numbers and the net rating and all that. It's very good. But it would require a big adjustment and likely, moving on from Julius Randle.
Yeah, and I don't know how they would move on from Julius, especially with that contract and the way Julius has really ended his season, which has been a great disappointment for Knicks fans everywhere. But Obi Toppin has obviously been a fan favorite, and so has the brand new SNY app. It's a place to go for Knicks coverage. Ian Begley has all his inside looks, including Mitchell Robinson's fantastic leap. Plus, you can watch Geico Sports Night live, as well as other original content that analyzes and reacts to all things Knicks. And it's your one and only place to stream the Mets if you're into that. Download the SNY app right now. Moving on to RJ Barrett, though, Marc, you tweeted the other day about RJ Barrett and the Knicks' decision to offer him a max contract extension. That got some outrage on Twitter.
It did get a little outrage. Yes, it did. A little hate mail coming my way. The gist of the story was he'll be eligible for that max extension. But I wasn't saying the Knicks shouldn't look into a contract extension for him. I just said, is he worth the $181 million max rookie extension that Darius Garland, an all-star, is reportedly going to receive? And my concern with RJ as a volume shooter is those percentages have to be better. He has gone down as a three-point shooter percentage-wise and as overall field goal percentage. His field goal percentage is right now 41%. When you're taking over 20 shots a game, that's not gonna, that's not winning basketball. And that's the problem. When you look at Julius and RJ, they're both averaging the same amount of points, but they're both shooting about 41%. RJ is still streaky. Again, against Cleveland, 4 of 18. Yesterday, he was much better. I think he was 9 of 17 from the field. But listen, he's a terrific draft pick at number 3. There were questions, should they have moved back? And listen, Garland has proven very well. But Barrett looks like he could be an all-star, but he's got to improve his passing. When he gets into the lane, he's double, triple teamed. He's drawing these double, triple teams, and Thibodeau loves it. But sometimes he forces the issue, and that's why his percentages are lower. His shot gets blocked a lot. He's got to be a smarter player, and he's only 21. Though he's an old 21, he's very mature for his years. I hope he keeps improving his decision making. Is he worth the rookie max? I mean, possibly, but it's not a definite in my eyes.
Yeah, and Jonathan, obviously you took exception to Marc's perspective there, and he obviously elaborated on it here. What's your reaction to all of that?
I mean, one, it's so easy to take exception to Marc. I mean, is there anybody easier to take exception to in the entire league? No, I thought his initial tweet, which I think came at the end of a game where RJ kind of had an uncontested dunk at the end of a game that was already decided. I thought it was a little bit of kicking a man when he's down. Like, how many 21-year-olds are going to bypass the opportunity to put another 2 points in the box score? But that aside, again, this is crazy. I'm actually not going to wholeheartedly disagree with Marc's stance here, which is that the notion that, and I did a whole newsletter for Knicks Film School last week on it, the notion that RJ Barrett is an automatic no-brainer, midnight max, right, for the 181, like the numbers just don't justify that. You look back the last 10 years, guys who are third year had RJ's usage rate of at least 27. Pretty much all of them end up with a max. Colin Sexton last season being a notable exception. But the difference is all those guys had, efficiency, for their position around at least in the 40th percentile, 45th. Most of them were in the 60s, 70s higher. RJ's in the 21st percentile in efficiency for wings around the league. That's not great. The one thing I'll say, and this is where I kind of push back against Marc, is like, I think the way that RJ Barrett goes about getting his offense is something where even if he's not making as many shots as you'd like, getting a lot of opportunities for offensive rebounds, which the way the Knicks currently have their team set up with Mitchell Robinson and obviously Jericho Sims there. I mean, Mitchell Robinson might be the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. So it works from that perspective. It works from the perspective of he's getting to the free throw line over 7 times a game since New Year's Eve. It's one of the best figures in the league. And then and Marc alluded to this, I do think we've seen material improvements in the playmaking. I want to see more. He's going to finish the year averaging about 3 assists, up to about 3.5 since New Year's Eve, since he's had a higher usage rate. Got to get that up to like 4.5, 5. Doesn't need to be that crazy high, but at the end of the day, like, and I'm curious what Ian has thoughts on this. Like, I feel like he kind of has the Knicks over a barrel. Like, are the Knicks in any position to say, no, we're going to risk this thing getting ugly when, you guys said it already. Fans love RJ. He's going to be the face of the franchise once they move on from Julius Randle officially. They could try to negotiate. I'll be curious to see what comes of it. I just don't know how it's going to go.
I think they're going to be in a bit of a tough spot, Jonathan. You bring up a good point, and it's not just because of the stats or what we've been talking about, but if you look at the numbers and his numbers since they put the ball in his hands over the past few months, statistically, you can make numbers kind of say different things. But if you're RJ Barrett and his representatives, you can point to those counting stats and say, hey, look at where we are, and look at the past history of contracts that have been handed out. We're right there. And that in part is based on the role that the Knicks have given Barrett over these past few months. And it makes all the sense in the world for them to put the ball in his hands. But when you go to that negotiating table this summer, I just wonder if some of those numbers could be used against them. And certainly, the last thing you would want if you're the Knicks is your homegrown talent, being upset, disgruntled, going into year 4. It might make business sense to play hardball, and it probably does make business sense to play hardball, but you wonder how the big picture factors in here with regards to the Knicks really wanting to steer clear from any kind of drama or, off-court negative storyline. They want to move away from that as much as they can, and having your number 3 pick in 2019, not thrilled with the franchise going into next season, certainly would be a storyline here. So I wonder how that factors into everything.
And Marc doesn't need any more storylines to write about.
Are you sure? I think he needs a whole bunch, man.
But listen, he's a restricted free agent if they don't give him the rookie max. And they could roll the dice and just sign him as a restricted free agent. They can match any offer. Maybe they want to see more. Listen, he's right now the face of the franchise. The Knicks want him to be the face of the franchise. They realize Julius Randle is not well liked by the fan base. So from a publicity standpoint, he may just get that rookie max. But I just don't know basketball-wise yet if he's completely worth it. If I'm convinced he is worth $181 million right this moment.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. Like, there are two sides to it where, he is the face of the franchise, but has he shown enough, to earn that type of money? And I think we all can agree that probably not as it stands right now. But Marc, on Sunday, Steve Popper tweeted that RJ came over towards the media table and urged you and others to write something positive about this Knicks team. Is that true? Is that really what happened?
Yeah, well, it was in the fourth quarter. He didn't think he was going back in the game. He was already engaging with the fans, and he came over to the press table right to me and said, Berman, you better write something positive off this one. And he's been chiding me ever since that story from a couple of weeks ago. When he walked into the press room, he commented after the game, he's like, Berman, I'm waiting to see the story. Has it posted yet? So he's been gently ribbing me, or not so gently ribbing me for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, but clearly you've got tough skin, so you're used to this. I mean, you've been in the game for so long, so that I don't think anything really phases you at this point.
No, I do have a thick skin, and I find it actually humorous.
Yeah, but make sure to visit SNY.TV for plenty of excellent Knicks coverage. You get the latest edition of Begley's Mailbag, plus David Würzberger stacks up the younger core against the rest of the NBA. And Brian Benjamin is asking, what are the chances that we see Alec Burks start for the rest of the season? He's a guy who's got a lot of minutes and somebody who hasn't produced the way you would expect somebody with all those minutes accumulated.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the last part of that. I mean, I think he's in a position where it's not his natural position. But you look at what he did against Orlando, he's coming off a strong game. So, he hasn't produced like a traditional point guard. But I think having him in the lineup, I know it drives some Knicks fans crazy because they want to see the young guys play, but it allows RJ Barrett to have the ball in his hands a lot. Allows Julius Randle to have the ball in his hands a lot. So I'm not sure that saying that he hasn't played well is necessarily accurate. But if you have watched this team all year long, there's no reason to think that Alec Burks would not be starting these final few games. One thing, though, I wanted to say on RJ Barrett and him kind of getting into it with Berman in a playful way is it seems to me at least, he can handle this market and the scrutiny that comes with this market pretty well. I mean, he's 21 years old, and Knick people would say since the day he got here that he's pretty level-headed and he's not letting yesterday's criticism impact how he approaches the next day. And the thing with Marc and him kind of having fun with Marc is, to me, an example of that. He's not taking this stuff too seriously. We've seen other players, it get to them, fan criticism, media criticism, getting to them, and you haven't seen it with Barrett. And to me, that's an underrated characteristic here that probably gets some consideration from the Knicks when you talk about what to do with Barrett long term.
Absolutely. And now let's move on to the guy we've been talking about throughout the show, but haven't really dived into deeply, and that's Julius Randle. And Jonathan, you describe Julius as the real problem when compared to Mr. Tom Thibodeau. So how much of the blame should he get for this season, and why?
I mean, I don't know that I'm in the minority, but I think a lot of fans would blame Tibbs, right? Because Tibbs is the one who's making decisions. To me, it's just like, imagine you're Tom Thibodeau, and imagine, you came into this year with a guy who, he was voted all NBA second team last year. And was he actually one of the 10 best players in the league? I don't know about that, but he had one of the 10 best seasons, according to the media out there. And this season, if you look at the advanced numbers, if you just look at efficiency stats, it's a pretty easy argument. He's been the worst high usage player in the league. There's so many stats you could throw out. I mean, one of them is, their defensive rating when he's off the court is like 1.5 better than Boston's league leading number. It's, and then it's just obviously it's the eye test too, which is the offense has a very different look and a very different feel. Now, where I think a lot of people go a little bit too far is the notion that if you just took Julius Randle off the team and completely didn't replace him with anything, that the Knicks would automatically become a better team. I'm not sure I'm quite there yet, because I was talking about this with Jeremy on my pod yesterday. He does fill that role of the number one. Now, he might be the worst number one this year, at least in the league, but you still need someone to take those possessions. And if he leaves, it moves everybody up a notch. For me personally, I think some of the periphery stuff with him and how he has, gone about the relationship with the fans, and just you watch him on the court. The thing at the end of their win last week where he kind of sulked off, that rubbed me the wrong way. That's just me though. So I don't know what is it like to have him in the locker room as the leader of the team. That's dicey.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think for me, just from an outside perspective, I feel like RJ he seems to be one of the prominent leaders. And yeah, I'm not sure how, that whole dynamic has worked with Julius, because clearly he was the undisputed leader last season. But Marc, what we've talked about, they're probably going to move on from Julius Randle in this offseason or whenever, right? So what do you think is the likelihood of him being back in the Knicks uniform, specifically because of the contract that he signed last year with the Knicks?
Well, it's not a full maximum contract. It was a contract extension. He could have gotten more if he became an unrestricted free agent, although after the season, he would not have. But I don't think it's an impossible thing to trade him. It's just, what are you getting back? But regarding Julius, his big issue this season has really been his lack of leadership.
Yeah,
it's been stunning how poorly he has led this team after last season. And RJ Barrett is right now the leader of this team. And obviously Randle handles the ball too much and his three-point shooting went down, but I feel that his teammates don't respect him anymore. And the fact, and I've written this on the road, he doesn't even participate in the pregame starting lineup introductions. He's in the back warming up. And it's just been a stunning reversal. And when Ian mentioned that RJ Barrett has handled the New York market impeccably, it's just the opposite for Julius. Since he became an all-star, going into the season, he has handled it very poorly. And I think Knicks brass is concerned on how he has handled himself as the number one guy. And that's why they're going to probably try to move on from him if there is a good deal on the table.
And speaking of potential good deals, Ian, John Riley's asking you, do you think there are any top teams that are eyeing Julius Randle right now?
The thing that I look at is Portland has a big trade exception, and I wonder if anything could happen there. I mean, they're going to be in on Jeremy Grant again, as they were prior to the trade deadline. So I think that would be probably a priority. But that's something to keep an eye on in my mind. But with regards to top teams being, looking at Randle, I know that several teams kind of had interest in Randle ahead of the deadline, and those teams were thinking about, Randle in a different role than he had played with the Knicks, and the idea that he could help them in that role. So that tells you a little bit about what his market might be in this coming offseason. But, you're trading, if you're the Knicks, you're trading from a very low point for Julius Randle. So teams can certainly take advantage of that. So I agree with Marc. It's about what you can get back. You don't want to just get him off just to get him off, because that's poor asset management. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And from a leadership perspective, though, some people with the Knicks said they didn't view Randle as a quote unquote traditional leader. Even last year when he was playing really well. So the idea that he hasn't led this group, I think maybe if you're the Knicks and you're asking Randle to do something that doesn't come naturally to him, that's a mistake on the Knicks' part as well.
Yeah, but it is a mistake, but it is jarring to see the body language that he's shown over the course of the season, where it does not look like, his game or his mind is fully into this game and with the teammates. But again, we don't know what's going on with Julius off the court, and won't speculate too much beyond that. But speaking about players that could potentially be moved on from, Harrison Rich is asking you, Ian, any updates on the Mitchell Robinson situation? He's been playing well as of late, and it'll be really disappointing to see him walk for nothing.
Yeah, I can't see an extension being reached by the end of the year. And I say that because I think Robinson probably wants to test unrestricted free agency at this point. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you see what's out there and see what other suitors, how they value you? Because clearly you weren't close to an extension, at least prior to the trade deadline. It was my understanding that, what Robinson and his group wanted and what the Knicks were offering at one point prior to the trade deadline was not very close. So why not go out and see what you could get on the open market? What his value would be, it's going to be interesting. There are several bigs on the market that will probably get decent money. Nurkic in Portland, Ayton, restricted free agent, Phoenix, and then you have Robinson. So where he lands, it's going to be curious for the Knicks. I would assume that they have a pretty good idea of what he can get on the open market. And the questioner mentioned it; he hit it on the head. If you let Robinson go and you don't get anything back in a sign and trade, which is not easy to do. To me, that is mismanagement from the Knicks, because this is an asset that, in Robinson, you had for 4 years. You hit a home run with the draft pick and getting him and where he is now. You have to get something back if he's going to walk out the door.
Absolutely. There's no scenario where if he leaves, you don't get anything back. Otherwise, that's a failure. And like you said, that's mismanagement from the front office. But look, we could talk Knicks all day, until we're blue in the face. But that's all the time we have for this show. So that'll do it for this live edition of the Putback with Ian Begley. Our thanks to both Marc Berman and Jonathan Macri for joining us and sharing their wonderful insight. As always, we'll wrap up the regular season next Monday, April 11th at noon with another live edition of the Putback, a can't miss episode. For Ian, I'm Chris. We'll see you soon.
Stand by. All right, you're good.